finding. So the highlight from the findings were personal perceptions. So the biggest one was the psychology of women seeing other women as doing better than themselves. So that was a big finding, and that fell into Professor Tom Schuller's finding of the psychology aspect behind things. The other thing we found was that ethnic minorities in general believe that they're not treated in the same manner as their white colleagues in the same capacity. We are getting better though with community pressures and family pressures. Things are getting better, so it shows that there is a move in the industry. Equal pay is still one of those things. It's not equal. We've had a lot in the UK at the moment with BBC, with Google, so that there's a lot going on. So overall though, the results were positive, and we found that there is a big drive for recruitment, but unfortunately there's not a big drive for retention. So that's where the gap in the industry is. So in summary, we find that ethnic minorities still believe that they have to work harder in order to achieve the same roles as their male counterparts or their white counterparts. And we also found that it was mixed in regards to how women feel they are treated on site. Some believe it's still a man's world. Others, however, believe that it's not. It's now become quite equal. So there was a divide amongst the participants. The other thing we found, which was one of the main findings, was that ethnic minorities look at the collective of women in construction and they see how well they're doing. However, when it came to answering about themselves, completely different. They saw their careers as something that wasn't performing as well as they expected it to. And a good thing that's come from the findings is that there is still some family pressure, there are still some cultural obligations. However, in 2016 to 2017, we are getting a lot better, which is a good positive. We have found, though, that there are some initiatives, but there could be more. We could incorporate the same initiative as the finance industry, who have gone forward with the 30% club and they've made it work. And maybe we need to look at incorporating the same thing within the construction industry and the built environment to diversify board members. So the avenue for further research there's another motivation behind that as well, is from these findings, I'm going forward now and I'm looking into women in construction as a whole, and I'm going to test my own findings and then see how women want to see things go forward. So this is just a starting place. So, and it's happened again. Any questions?
Thank you very much for keeping the time. So, any questions?
Okay.
Thank you. Rachel, thank you for your presentation. Have you considered comparing your result with surveys that have targeted men from ethnic minorities and see whether the same negative perception prevails?
I haven't initially considered it. However, it could be an avenue that I could consider in the future. So it's a very good point.
Because if you find them there share more or less the same findings,
Yep.
then perhaps we're not looking at the gender basis.
Maybe it is another issue.
That's right.
Which is very true.
Because we went through similar exercise in Australia,
Yep.
but in the mining industry.
Right, okay.
Okay, because the mining industry pay handsomely to women to go there to drive huge trucks because they prefer women drivers than men's drivers.
Right,
And I trust
okay.
in Canada probably will be the same because of the environment. But we were surprised to see that it wasn't gender-based when it comes to how they perceive work and being perceived by their workmates.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
No, thank you very much, Rachel. My question was close to Professor Sharif's, but what about the female, but not from the ethnic minority? What's the situation with the female? I work in the UK.
Yep.
And they faced similar problems as well.
That's right.
Maybe
yeah.
not exactly the same, but as a female, whichever group you belong to, is difficult to join in the construction industry. What is the situation there?
So what I did in this study was I had a look at how white women, English women, saw ethnic minorities in construction, and the findings came that they thought that everything was equal, that actually there is no problem. Whereas when the ethnic minority data came back, for them there is a problem. So going forward, it was a case of getting this, as soon as this is done, we're going to get this out to every company who participated to give them an idea, but they're all very interested in finding out how people view things. But going forward, I'm opening this research out now to all women. And I'm currently in the middle of writing something as we speak. So you'll have to wait and see for that one.
Thank you.
To be continued. There you go. Is that okay? Yeah?
Thanks for that. In terms of going forward, it would be good to go beyond the defining the problem and then seeking to improve things. So it would, with the help of maybe some funding, you might at some point want to consider an intervention study where you have an intervention, you measure before, have an intervention, and then measure after to see if there's been some improvement. But a study such as that would need resources, time, money, especially money.
It's a good idea, though. It's something to consider in the future. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel, for this wonderful presentation and very interesting too. But I feel that your research was focused normally on the numbers and quantitative research. I was wondering what's the women added value or they bring the value into the construction industry. I was wondering if you have looked into this side as well as not only the number but also the quality that they bring into the construction industry. Thank you.
Again, in the middle of writing that as we speak. So I've also looked at diversifying boards, diversifying groups, and higher management, and just management as in the job that I do. So looking into it at the moment, and again, I'm going to have to answer your question in the same way. You're going to have to wait and see. Sorry.
So you're working on it?
I'm working on it as we speak, yep. This one was solely for ethnic minorities in construction, purely because it's personal to me, it's close to my heart, so it's coming, it's getting there. Yeah.
Okay, no more questions? So now we invite our next speaker, Dr. Islam Abu Hila. Okay, Dr. Islam Abu Hila is a registered architect with solid experience in research and teaching, building science, architecture, interior design, and design-related modules. His research interests focus on implementing simulation tools in understanding building physics, energy performance in buildings, renewable sources of energy in urban areas, and effect of behavioral interventions on energy consumption in buildings, in addition to investigating the relationship between film and architecture. Dr. Abu Hila is currently working as the head of Civil and Architecture Engineering Department at the Applied Science University. He is going to take us to the cinema today.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We need that after the lunch especially.
Exactly.
And he's going to discuss with us the fictional story of renewables.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farzana. As Dr. Farzana has mentioned, that it's a challenge to give a presentation or attend a presentation after lunch, to be honest with you, especially if you haven't had lunch like me. So my topic today is about the fictional story of renewables, a proposition for a sustainable future. Actually, this research is trying to link two researches which I did previously. The first one is about the portrayal of architecture in science fiction films, how production designers predict the future of architecture in science fiction films. And later on I did another research about the integration of renewable sources of energy, mainly wind turbines within the built environment. The first thing which comes to mind, to be honest with you, is the Bahrain World Trade Center and the 3 wind turbines which are stacked on top of each other between the twin towers. So film is a very powerful medium which can communicate new ideas to the public in a very easy way. The idea of integrating renewable sources of energy, mainly wind turbines, within the built environment has many uncertainties, and so many people would think that this would not work, and the public would say so. So I was looking at the link between these two topics and how the film would play a role in introducing ideas like integrating wind turbines within the built environment. So that was the scope of the study. Let me start with a little bit of a background about urban wind turbines, small-scale wind turbines, when compared to large-scale wind turbines. Many people consider large-scale wind turbines as a bad feature of the landscape, while urban wind turbines, they don't have this problem, so they have an advantage. Also, urban wind turbines, they don't suffer from losses due to energy losses due to transmission. We know that there are lots of losses in the energy from the point of generation to the point of production, while in the case of urban wind turbines, the energy is being consumed where it is generated. Also, the infrastructure costs apply to this part as well. Buildings actually accelerate wind. When wind hits a building, it gets accelerated. If you are able to spot these areas where the wind gets accelerated and correctly mount a wind turbine, you can benefit from the acceleration which happens when wind hits a building or an obstacle. Obviously, the nature of the wind is going to be turbulent. It's going to be changing direction, changing speed, but vertical axis wind turbine can overcome this problem. Urban wind turbines as well act as a visual message for tackling climate change, which is something which we really need to be aware of. Like when we see Bahrain World Trade Center, it moves us, it makes us ask questions about the integration of renewables within the built environment and how we can combat climate change through renewables. So urban wind turbines, they have high potentials, but we can see that we don't see so many installations of urban wind turbines within the built environment. So why is that? If they have these high potentials, and it is evident in research and literature review, why we have a problem of seeing so many urban wind turbines integrated within the built environment? It's mainly because of previous unconscious installations. Someone would be interested in the idea, they go to the market, they bring a micro-scale wind turbine, and they mount it on top of the roof, and then it's not working. It's not generating electricity. And then they start promoting the idea that urban wind turbines are not working. The problem is that a wind assessment, a proper wind assessment was not done so that I would specify the correct location for mounting the wind turbine. So, and we know that like the wind energy or the wind within the built environment, the conditions are unfavorable because of the changing direction, the changing speed. We know that for wind turbines to operate, we need to have a steady flow of the wind, but because we don't make the proper assessment, we end up with low or zero yield, high aerodynamic noise levels and bad reputation for urban wind turbines. As I've said in the start, film and renewable source of energy, we need to ask ourselves the question, what is the role films can play to promote the integration of renewables within the built environment? First, we need to know what is the role for architecture for film. Architecture is used as a communication tool through which directors and filmmakers can send certain messages, and architecture gives the film its believability because it sets the context. In addition, architecture plays an important role as a signifier, signifying different aspects of the society. On the other hand, film plays a role for architecture as it provides architecture with an outlet of realizing future visions. In addition, it's an ideal fulfillment of what architecture can be about because we are not bounded by so many constraints such as the weatherproofing, the contract bidding, or building codes. When it comes to film, there is a fact, or when it comes to journalism, there is a fact that never lets the fact get in the way of a good story. Is that true? Is science fiction films are really scientific, or when it comes to films, this rule applies? Well, when we look into films, we will find that some technological advancements, such as like the video conferencing, it was introduced in films previously before they became a reality, as well as predicting major events. For example, what happened in 9/11, the Twin Towers, it was predicted previously in films. As well as, for example, new trends and styles in architecture, such as the modern architecture, which was first introduced in a film like The Fountainhead. So film plays a role in dissemination of ideas and conditioning people to believe and accept new ideas. So let's go through films and see how films tackle the future. We will find that there are two main strands. The first is about utopia in films, and the second is about dystopia, which is the opposite of utopia. The characteristics of the built environment in the future is mostly clean, technology dominated, transparent, lots of glass, skyscrapers, lots of billboards, flying vehicles, modern architecture, and large corporations dominating the skyline of the city. However, on the other side, when it comes to dystopia, the future is dark, deprived of natural resources, it is polluted, and has a reference to old architectural styles. I'll go through maybe 3 films and see how renewables were portrayed in these films. One of the films is Oblivion, which was produced in 2013. And we can see here there is a vertical axis wind turbine and a photovoltaic array. But when we look into the context of that film, we will find that although this is incorporated within the built environment, the wind turbine is rusty. The photovoltaic cell seems like one of those first generation of photovoltaic cells. So they have negative connotations associated with them. They are not appealing to the viewer. The Perfect Sleep, which was produced in 2009 as well, we see that this film is, would say, a film noir genre. And we will see that most of the killing which happens in the film takes place within wind farms. So another negative connotation of urban wind turbines. So subconsciously, the viewer associate urban wind turbines or wind turbines in general with something negative. So when it is introduced to them, they immediately or they sometimes think, this is not a good idea. Another good example is the Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is an anime which was produced in 1984. And this was one of the good examples of powering a city with traditional windmills, and they resemble the Dutch windmills. So the renewables, are they utopic or dystopic? For the utopia, it is more sophisticated, it's more based in science, it's more expensive to visualize, which is a very important aspect, which will take us to the question why people are not, or the film producers are not associating wind turbines with something utopic. On the other hand, dystopia, it's the easy way because it requires less details and the context is not optimistic. However, the problem is that renewables are used within a dystopic context. The thing, as I mentioned in the previous slide, the renewables are usually used when there is a crime taking place, when there is something which has a negative connotation taking place, which immediately makes a sense of rejection towards urban wind turbines or renewables integration within the built environment. However, when we go to the reality and see the built environment, we can see these 3 examples: the Bahrain World Trade Center, the Pearl River Tower in China, and the Strata SE1 London, in Elephant and Castle in London. The 3 buildings are already built. They are integrating wind turbines within the built environment. There are, of course, many questions about whether or not they are producing the amount of electricity which they promised. But we can see that in reality, it is actually more futuristic than science fiction films. Yet we don't see many filmmakers using these places as shooting places for their films which will take place in the future. So the reality is actually more futuristic than what's happening in science fiction films. One of the serious attempts in producing films which are integrating wind turbines within the built environment is the Crystal Future Life, which is a small short film being broadcasted in the Crystal Building in Greenwich. The building is like a museum for sustainability. The building itself, I think it has LEED Platinum, and they have produced a film integrating all sources of renewable sources of energy within the built environment. So we can see here vertical axis wind turbine. Most of the roofs are integrating photovoltaic cells, and it gives this positive image about the integration of renewables within the built environment. The concluding remarks about this paper are some observations. In many areas of the world, there isn't presently widespread acceptance of the incorporation of renewables, particularly wind turbines, into architecture, urban design, and landscape. In many cases, it is dismissed due to the associated uncertainties. Film has the potential to put a very positive spin on the use of renewable energy that could be met with less skepticism. Informed science fiction films play an important role in examining certain predictions and offering scientific-based solutions to the problem. If people have been conditioned to see these renewable energy systems in the future version of life visualized in film, it is quite likely that they might be more accepting of them. Also, likely building systems are well beyond the focus or skill level of most set designers. This is because most of them were not educated in architecture, and if so, they were most probably not taking environmentally focused courses. So the way forward might be, in conclusion, it would seem that the real significance of image of renewable source of energy in science fiction films lies in the failure of contemporary films to embrace the visual potential of renewable forms of energy, such as photovoltaics and wind, in the creation of utopian architectural and urban environments of the future. Commercially based produced science fiction films can still be used as the means to create vital future environments that demonstrate the engagement of renewable energy systems. And to be honest with you, I'm considering this paper a call for collaboration between architects, filmmakers, and engineers to work on a research project with the aim of producing a short commercial film promoting the use of renewables within the built environment. As I've said at the start, it's a link between two researchers trying to find some observations, to come up with some observations about the way in which the integration of renewables within the built environment is used in films. And this is more of opening discussion about that topic and the way forward from this paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for sticking to the time. So Dr. Islam is trying to market for the renewables through cinema and movies and science fiction.
True.
Okay. So any questions?
Thank you, Islam. A very, very interesting research topic. I suppose my question links to students in architecture. And have you considered actually ascertaining from students, their perception around film as a pedagogical tool to get their understanding of actual sustainable practice?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, because when I first started working on the topic of film and architecture, I was using films as a teaching tool. And I had organized some seminars, for example, looking at science fiction films and inviting students to watch the films and relate to, for example, the history of architecture or the different discourses about architecture. And the outcome of these discussions were really interesting, and the students were much more involved in these discussions compared to the discussions we had in normal, for example, history of architecture class. So it's a very powerful tool, not just for promoting the idea of integrating renewables within the built environment, but it's a very powerful tool to make the students more interested in the subject, for example, of architecture, of renewables, etc. So, for example, if we're talking about the airflow around buildings, inside buildings, if we incorporate this through a film, the students would be much more involved than just delivering a normal lecture to them.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I find it a very fascinating tool, actually, to promote such ideas. But then moving from the context of the education, is there any initiatives that we have in our region that are trying to bring those ideas to the public? Because, and when I say public, I'll be highlighting or maybe putting some underlines under youth, because 70% of the population in the Arab region is under the age of 25. Yep. And they are excellent users nowadays for social media, exchanging those short movies. It doesn't need to be a long film. So I think this can be a really very good tool for promoting sustainable and renewable energy methods. Is there anything that is taking place?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm aware of like two films which tackle this point. The one which is broadcasted in the Crystal in Greenwich in London, which is it's a short film which is tackling all the aspects of the future and the integration of renewables within the built environment and how it affects our lives. And there was another project called the Wind Project, which is another short film. I believe it was like 3 years ago about how we can depend on wind energy. Like it was a drama. It was not just a documentary film, and that was really good about it. What I'm trying to highlight here is the role of film in doing so. This is an invitation for filmmakers and for people who are interested in renewable sources of energy to use the film as a tool for promoting renewable sources of energy and their integration within the built environment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Doctor. Thank you. So our next speaker for today, Professor Lloyd Scott. Lloyd graduated in 1988 with a Bachelor in Technology with honors in wood and building technology. He is teaching and researching in the area of construction technology, thermal performance. He coached architecture and construction students for the international competition in design build. Lloyd Scott is a PhD supervisor and academic advisor and partner coordinator in the School of Surveying and Construction Management at Dublin Institute of Technology. He joined the institute in 2000. He has produced many peer-reviewed conference journal papers. He is a member in 2 journals. One of them is the International Journal of Construction, Education and Research, and the other is the International Journal of Building Pathology and Adaptation. His research interests include sustainable construction and education, modern approaches to thermal performance, development of sustainable energy sources and their practical application in Ireland, and project delivery methods for sustainable environment in Ireland. So he will discuss with us today the comparative investigation of industry academics and students' perceptions on essential sustainability knowledge, competencies, and skills. And he's looking for the embedding of the sustainability focus in the curriculum for undergraduate and graduate. So convince us. Thank you.
I'm delighted to be here with you today for this conference. It's my first time to present in the Middle East. I've been a visitor here, but not to Bahrain, but to the Middle East in the past. So I'm delighted to be here. And I really want to talk to you about the context of my research. I'll give you a little bit of background to it, looking at, I'll justify the research approach and discuss that a little bit, and show you the research findings that have emerged in my work to date, and I'll show you the analysis of some of that, and then look to recommendations from the research that are emerging and the future work, because this is an ongoing research project that I'm associated with. And you can see there, I'm involved in sustainable construction. My professorship is at the University of Oklahoma in the US, where I teach sustainable construction to undergraduate construction management students. So the research that I'm presenting in terms of students' views is from those students on that construction sustainability course. I suppose in terms of sustainability, we all have different views. Policymakers have views on sustainability. Stakeholders in terms of clients for projects have views on sustainability. Academics have views on sustainability. And I suppose it's different things to different people. So our understanding of sustainability is complex. And you know, you've heard presenters already speak about sustainability coming forward in terms of what Brundtland had to say up to the modern day position. And I was very heartened to listen to Professor Egbu this morning speaking about it in terms of, you know, where we need to go to and where the future should be. And because that resonates with me, because I believe what we should be sharing with students, the students we teach, we should be embedding their understanding of sustainability and how it actually impinges and develops them as a person, and the contribution that they can make to society. I was certainly struck. I was at a sustainability conference in Hong Kong in last June, and one of the presenters in the session that I was at spoke about his son and how his son was very, very sustainable conscious because they went out to buy a pair of runners, trainers, and the son wanted to know what the sustainable strategy for companies like Nike and Adidas were. And he had already researched that on the World Wide Web and was able to actually tell his father actually where they were coming from in terms of their sustainability strategy. So for me as an educator, you know, those sort of things resonate because we're going to be teaching the future architecture, engineering and construction professionals, and we need to be very conversant and au fait with sustainability so that we can actually deliver quality to them in terms of sustainable approaches. And they certainly are clued into sustainability at a younger age than we were in the past. I suppose the decisions we make in relation to the education of students is very, very important, and making the wrong decision can be very powerful. I mentioned that June conference, the sustainability conference in Hong Kong. Just around that time, the President of the US made his announcement in terms of pulling out of the Paris Agreement. And I was struck by that, like everybody else around the world, in that what's going to happen to the actual climate change agenda. And Cristina Figueres, who was the UN Executive Secretary in the past, she used that as an opportunity to actually present the positives, that sustainability had gone off the agenda a little bit, and she felt by actually the US pulling out of the Paris Agreement that it was actually back on the agenda again, and she thanked President Trump for actually doing that. So again, the message we give out to people around sustainability, I think, is very, very important. And this is the context in which we're living, so it's important that we do that. Linking it into the sustainability, the 17 Sustainability Development Goals is very important, I believe, too, in terms of one of the goals, Goal 4, is a quality education. So that's really, really important, embedding it both in primary, secondary and tertiary education. So from that perspective, it's important that we put it out there. I suppose I put this slide up here because that's what our institution in Dublin has agreed as the graduate attributes. So again, researching this area, I look to see what is it that we expect